The space station called Harmony 7 floated in the darkness between three star systems. It was a place where many species came to live, work, and trade. Over 40 different kinds of alien beings walked through its long metal hallways every day. They came from planets with purple skis, worlds made entirely of ice, and moons that glowed with strange light. But among all these creatures, there was only one human. Her name was Park. Worked as an engineer in the maintenance division. Her job was to fix broken pipes, repair power systems, and keep the station running smoothly. She was good at her work. Very good. The station commander had even given her an award once for stopping a reactor leak that could have killed hundreds. But despite her skills, despite her award, despite living on the station for almost 2 years, always ate her meals alone. It was not her choice at first. When she arrived on Harmony 7, she tried to make friends. She smiled at her. She asked about their families and their home planets. She even learned a few words in 3 different alien languages, but the other species kept their distance. They were the first to complain. They were beautiful creatures with bodies made of living crystal. Light passed through them and created rainbows on the walls when they walked, but they could not stand human body heat. To them, was like a small fire walking around the station. Being near her made their crystal bodies feel strange and uncomfortable, so they asked to be moved to a different work area. They came next. They were tall and thin, with silver skin and large black eyes. They were known across the galaxy as great diplomats and peacemakers, but they found human eating habits deeply disturbing. The sounds made when she chewed her food, the way she used her hands, the smell of cooked meat on her breath, all of it was too much for their sensitive nature. They requested that humans eat in a separate area. The station council discussed the matter for 3 days. In the end, they gave a table in the far corner of the cafeteria, next to the large window that looked out into space. They also moved her living quarters to the end of the residential ring, far from the other species. It was for everyone's comfort, they said. It was the diplomatic solution. Did not argue. She did not complain. She simply nodded and moved her few belongings to her new room. That was 18 months ago. Now sat at her corner table every day, eating her meals in silence. She watched cargo ships come and go through the viewport. She counted the stars. She listened to the sounds of 40 species talking, laughing, and sharing food with their friends and families. And she tried not to feel lonely. Most days she succeeded. Today was not most days. Poked at her food with a metal spoon. It was supposed to be rice porridge, but the station's food processors never got the texture quite right. It was too thick, too sticky, and somehow both too hot and too cold at the same time. She ate it anyway. It was the closest thing to home she could find out here among the stars. As she ate, she felt something strange, a tingling at the back of her neck, the feeling of being watched. Looked up slowly. Across the crowded cafeteria, past the trading stories in their musical language, past the discussing politics in hushed tones, she saw them. 3 small creatures sat at a table with 2 larger ones. They looked like cats, but not exactly. They walked on 2 legs like humans. They had fur that ranged from dark gray to pure white. Their eyes were silver and caught the light like mirrors, and all 3 of the small ones were staring directly at. She knew what they were, a proud species from a planet of endless mountains and deep valleys. The adults were fierce warriors and strict parents. They valued family above all else, and their children, their cubs, were considered the most precious things in their entire culture. Had read about them in the station's cultural database. Cubs were sacred to the. To touch one without permission was a crime. To harm one, even by accident, could start a war. The parents protected their young with a passion that other species found both admirable and terrifying. The 3 cubs continued to stare at. The smallest one, with fur the color of storm clouds, tilted its head to one side. Its little nose twitched. Its silver eyes were wide with curiosity. Did something she should not have done, she smiled. The smallest cub's ears perked up. It made a small sound, almost like a chirp, and tugged at the arm of what assumed was its mother. The mother looked over at with an expression that was impossible to read. Then she turned back to her meal and pulled her cub closer. Looked away quickly. Her heart was beating fast. She did not know why such a small moment felt so important. Perhaps it was because someone had actually looked at her. Perhaps it was because the cub's curiosity had seemed genuine, without fear or disgust. Perhaps she was just lonely enough that any attention felt like a gift. She finished her meal in silence and returned to work. But that night, lying in her small room at the end of the residential ring, could not stop thinking about the three cubs, the way they had watched her, the way the smallest one had tilted its head, the sound it had made, so soft and curious. She wondered what they saw when they looked at her. Did they see a strange creature to be feared, a dangerous being to be avoided, or did they see something else entirely? Fell asleep without finding an answer. In the cafeteria, the three cubs whispered to each other in their own language. They had been watching the human for many days now. They had noticed things that the adults had not. The human always sat alone. The human always looked sad. And the human was warm. So very, very warm. The smallest cub had felt it when the human smiled. A wave of heat had crossed the room, gentle and inviting. It was like the thermal vents back home, the ones where the cubs used to sleep in great piles of fur and purring contentment. The cub missed that warmth. The station was cold. The metal walls were cold. Even their parents' fur was not warm enough. But the human was warm. The three cubs looked at each other and made a decision. They would learn more about this strange, lonely, wonderfully warm creature. They would watch and wait for the right moment. And then they would make their move. 3 days passed on Harmony 7. Continued her work, fixing broken systems and keeping the station alive. She continued eating alone at her corner table, and the three cubs continued watching her. They were not very good at hiding. Every time looked up from her meal, she could see their silver eyes peeking at her from across the room. The smallest one had started waving at her. Had not waved back, but she had smiled again. Just a small smile, just for a moment. She knew she should stop. Smiling showed teeth. Many species saw that as a threat, but the cubs did not seem afraid. They seemed delighted. On the 4th day, someone came to find in the engineering bay. His name was Bay. He was the assistant to the human ambassador, one of only 5 humans on the entire station. He was tall and thin, with kind eyes and a worried expression that seemed permanent. Had spoken to him only a few times before, mostly at official human gatherings that the ambassador organized every few months. Closed the door behind him and looked around the engineering bay nervously. Put down her welding torch and removed her safety mask. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Moved closer and lowered his voice. "I came to warn you, there is a problem." Felt her stomach drop. "What kind of problem?" "The delegate has filed a concern about you with the station council." His mind raced through everything she had done in the past week. She had fixed a water recycler on Deck 7. She had replaced some worn cables near the cargo bay. She had eaten her meals quietly at her corner table. What could she possibly have done wrong? "I don't understand," she said. "I haven't even spoken to I stay away from everyone just like the council asked." Shook his head. "It's not about what you have done, it's about what might happen. Their cubs have been asking about you." The cubs remembered the 3 small faces watching her, the smallest one waving. "They are just curious. I haven't encouraged them. I barely even look at them." "You smiled at them." Felt her face grow hot. "Once, maybe twice, I was just being friendly." Sighed and sat down on a metal crate. He looked tired, like a man who spent too much of his life apologizing for things he did not do. "In culture, cubs are sacred," he said. "More sacred than anything else in their entire civilization. The parents watch over them constantly. They protect them from any possible danger. And right now, they see you as a possible danger. Me could not believe what she was hearing. I fix pipes and clean filters. I eat rice porridge alone in a corner. How am I dangerous? You are human, held up his hand before could argue. I know it's not fair, but you must understand how other species see us. We are warm-blooded, we are loud, we make sudden movements, we show our teeth when we are happy. All of these things are warning signs to most species in the galaxy. Sat down heavily on her work stool. She had heard all of this before. Every human learned it during their first week on a galactic station. But hearing it again now, when all she had done was smile at some curious children, made her feel more alone than ever. "What do they want me to do?" she asked quietly. "Stay away from the cubs. If they approach you, do not react. Do not touch them. Do not make eye contact. Do not show your teeth. Just sit still and wait for the parents to come get them." "And if I don't?" Looked at her with sad eyes. "The parents could demand your removal from the station. They have a lot of influence on the council. If they push hard enough, you could be sent back to Earth on the next transport ship." Thought about Earth. She had not been home in over 3 years. Part of her missed the blue sky and the green trees and the feeling of wind on her face. But a bigger part of her had built a life here, in the cold metal corridors of Harmony 7. This was her home now, even if she had to live in it alone. "I understand," she said finally. "I'll be careful." Stood up and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "I know this is hard. I know it's lonely out here for our kind. But the galaxy is still learning what humans are. Every small action we take becomes the story they tell about all of us. One mistake could set back human relations for decades." "No pressure," said with a bitter smile. Did not smile back. "I'm sorry, I really am." Then he left and was alone again. That evening, she sat at her corner table and stared at her food without eating. Across the cafeteria, she could see the family at their usual spot. The 3 cubs were there, whispering to each other and sneaking glances in her direction. The smallest one waved. Did not wave back. She did not smile. She looked down at her cold porridge and felt something heavy settle in her chest. She had spent 2 years trying to prove that humans were not dangerous. 2 years of being quiet and small and invisible. 2 years of eating alone and sleeping alone and working in silence while other species laughed and talked around her. And still they saw her as a threat. Pushed her food away. She was not hungry anymore. Across the room, the smallest cub stopped waving. Its ears drooped. It turned to its siblings and made a soft, sad sound that its parents did not hear. The human was not smiling today. The human looked unhappy. The cubs did not understand why. They only knew that the warm creature in the corner seemed even more alone than before, and something about that made them feel sad too. That night, curled together in their family quarters, the 3 cubs made a new plan. The adults did not want them near the human. The adults said it was dangerous. But the cubs had watched the human for many days. They had seen her eat alone. They had seen her walk through crowds where everyone moved away from her. They had seen the loneliness in her eyes, a loneliness they were beginning to understand. The human was not dangerous. The human was just like them, a small creature in a big, cold universe, looking for warmth wherever she could find it. The cubs decided they would give her that warmth. They would just have to be very brave. 1 week after the warning, sat at her corner table and stirred her lunch without interest. It was the same meal as always, rice porridge with small pieces of vegetable mixed in. The station's food processors had created it from basic proteins and starches, trying to match the recipe had programmed in. It never tasted quite right, but it was close enough to feel like home. The cafeteria was crowded today. A trade delegation from the outer systems had arrived that morning, bringing with them dozens of merchants and diplomats. The noise level was higher than usual. Voices spoke in 100 different languages. Translators beeped and buzzed as they struggled to keep up. The air smelled like a strange mix of foods from across the galaxy. Kept her head down. She had become very good at being invisible. For the past 7 days she had followed Sid's advice perfectly. She did not look at the cubs. She did not smile. She did not wave. When she saw them in the hallways, she turned and walked the other direction. It was working. The parents had stopped watching her with suspicious eyes. The station council had not called her in for any more discussions. Everything was calm, but felt more alone than ever. She lifted a spoon of porridge to her mouth and ate without tasting. Through the viewport beside her, she could see a cargo ship slowly approaching the station. Its lights blinked in a pattern that meant it was carrying medical supplies. Someone on the station was sick. Someone needed help. Hoped they would be okay. She was so focused on the ship that she did not notice the small figure approaching her table. She did not see the 2 other figures following close behind. She did not realize what was happening until a small, furry body climbed onto the bench beside her. Froze. The smallest cub, the one with storm-gray fur and silver eyes, was sitting right next to her. It was so close that she could feel the warmth of its body. It was looking up at her with an expression of pure determination, like a tiny soldier who had just completed a very dangerous mission. Before could react, the second cub appeared on her other side. This one had white fur with black spots, and its ears were slightly larger than its siblings. It pressed against its arm and made a sound like a small engine starting up. The third cub did not bother with the bench. It jumped directly onto the table, knocking over its water glass in the process. Water spilled across the metal surface and dripped onto the floor. The cub did not seem to notice or care. It was too busy climbing towards shoulder. The cafeteria went completely silent. Sat very, very still. Her heart was pounding so hard that she was sure everyone could hear it. Her hands were frozen in midair, holding a spoon that suddenly felt as heavy as a starship. She could feel dozens of eyes turning toward her. Hundreds of eyes. Every single creature in the cafeteria was staring at the human with 3 cubs crawling all over her. Across the room, she saw the parents rise to their feet. The father was massive, with dark brown fur and shoulders as wide as a doorway. The mother was slightly smaller but moved with a dangerous grace that spoke of years of combat training. Their faces were impossible to read. Near the entrance, spotted ambassador. The ambassador was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Right now, those eyes were wide with shock. Her mouth was open, but no words came out. Beside her, Bay had gone completely pale. Knew what she was supposed to do. She had memorized the instructions. Do not react. Do not touch them. Do not make eye contact. Sit still and wait for the parents. But the smallest cub was sniffing her hand. Its tiny nose was cold and wet against her palm. Its whiskers tickled her skin. And when it looked up at her, its silver eyes were filled with such pure, innocent curiosity that felt something in her chest break open. This was not a threat. This was not a diplomatic incident. This was just a child, a small, curious child who wanted to know what the lonely human was like. Made a decision. Very slowly, very carefully, she opened her fingers. She held her hand flat, palm up, like she was offering a gift. She kept her movements smooth and gentle, the way she might approach a scared animal back on Earth. The smallest cub sniffed her palm again. Then, without any warning, it climbed into her hand and curled up like a ball of gray fur. Its eyes closed. Its little body relaxed completely. And a sound started coming from its chest, a deep, rumbling vibration that could feel in her bones. The cub was purring. The second cub saw what its sibling had done and immediately demanded the same treatment. It pushed its way onto its lap, circled twice, and settled down with its head on her knee. More purring joined the first, creating a harmony of contentment. The third cub, still on the table, decided that its shoulder was the perfect spot. It draped itself around her neck like a living scarf, its tail hanging down her back, its small face pressed against her ear. Its purr was the loudest of all. Sat in the middle of the silent cafeteria, covered in purring cubs, and waited for the world to end. The mother reached the table first. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, and looking down with those unreadable amber eyes. Her claws were visible, curved and sharp enough to cut through metal. Every muscle in her body was tense. Looked up at her and saw the end of her life on Harmony 7. She saw herself being dragged before the council. She saw the transport ship that would take her back to Earth in shame. She saw everything she had built over the past 2 years crumbling to dust. But she did not let go of the cubs. She could not. They were warm and soft and trusting, and they had chosen her. Whatever happened next, she would not be the one to push them away. The mother stared at her for a long, terrible moment. Then she spoke. "Your body temperature," she said. Her translator turned the words into flat, emotionless sounds. "What is it?" Blinked. Of all the things she had expected the mother to say, this was not on the list. 37 degrees Celsius, she answered. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Standard for humans. The mother's eyes moved from to the cubs, then back again. Something in her expression shifted, just slightly, just enough for to notice. "I see," the mother said. And then she sat down at its table. The cafeteria remained frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. Every creature in the room watched as the mother sat down across from the human who was covered in her precious cubs. His mind was racing. She did not understand what was happening. By every rule she had learned, by every warning she had received, this situation should have ended with her being removed from the station. Instead, the mother was sitting calmly at her table, studying her with those deep amber eyes. The father approached next. He was even larger up close, a mountain of muscle and dark fur. But he did not look angry. He looked curious. He sat down beside his mate and folded his massive arms across his chest. "You are the human engineer," the mother said. It was not a question. "Yes," answered carefully. "My name is Park. I am called, this is my mate, and the 3 creatures currently using you as furniture are our cubs, Sola and Ren." Looked down at the smallest cub in her hand. Its eyes were still closed. Its purr had grown even louder. "Which one is this?" "That is Ren. He is the youngest and the most stubborn." A hint of warmth entered his voice. "He has been talking about you for many days." Did not know what to say. She glanced around the cafeteria. Everyone was still staring. Ambassador had moved closer but seemed afraid to interrupt. Looked like he might faint. "I'm sorry," said finally. "I tried to stay away from them. I know the rules. I know cubs are sacred to your people. I never meant to." Held up a large clawed hand. "You misunderstand." "I do. We filed the concern with the council because we did not understand what our cubs were doing. They kept talking about the human in the corner, the warm one, the lonely one. We thought perhaps you had done something to attract them, used some kind of technology or chemical. Humans are known for their strange inventions." Made a deep, rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. "I suggested you might be trying to kidnap them." Said sharply. "I was wrong." The big looked at with something like respect. Clearly I was wrong. Still did not understand. "Then why did they come to me? I really didn't do anything. I just sat here and ate my food." Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Cubs need heat. On our we have thermal vents, places where hot water rises from deep underground. The cubs sleep there in great piles, dozens of them together, sharing warmth. It is how they grow strong and healthy." She gestured at the metal walls around them, the cold corridors, the recycled air that never quite felt right. "Here there is no such warmth. We brought heating pads from home, but they are not the same. Artificial heat has no life to it, no heartbeat, no breath." Eyes softened as she looked at her cubs. "Our children have been cold since we arrived on this station. They do not complain, they are brave, but I have seen how they shiver in their sleep. I have seen how they press together, trying to find warmth that does not exist." Understanding finally dawned on. She looked down at the three cubs surrounding her, Ren in her hand, Sola on her lap, around her shoulders. They were not just curious about her. They were seeking heat. Human body temperature runs much higher than most species on the station, said slowly. They can barely stand to be near me. They say I'm like a small fire walking around. To them, perhaps you are uncomfortable, agreed. To my cubs, you are the first real warmth they have felt since leaving home. The cafeteria was still silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer tense and frightened. It was something else, something like wonder. Felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. I'm sorry I smiled at them. I know that showing teeth is considered a threat display for many species. I wasn't trying to scare them. Laughed again, a full, genuine laugh this time. Scare them. Little human, my cubs have not stopped talking about your smile for days. They say it made them feel safe. They say when you smile, your whole face becomes warm like sunlight on their fur. Do not smile, explained. We show affection in other ways, but our cubs have learned to read human expressions from the entertainment broadcasts they watch. They know what a smile means to your people. Stirred on shoulder and made a small, sleepy sound. Without thinking, reached up and gently stroked the cub's fur. It was incredibly soft, softer than anything she had ever touched, purred louder and nuzzled against her hand. I should not have done that, said, freezing. I'm sorry, touching without permission. You have permission, interrupted. From this moment forward, you have our permission to touch our cubs, to hold them, to share your warmth with them. She paused. If you are willing. Stared at her. You're serious. Do not joke about our cubs. For the first time in 2 years, felt something warm bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with body temperature. It was hope. It was belonging. It was the feeling of being wanted, even if only by 3 small, furry creatures who saw her as a living heating pad. I'm willing, she said. I would be honored. Nodded, a gesture of formal respect. Then she turned to look at the watching crowd. Her voice rose, clear and commanding. Let it be known that the human park is a friend to the. She has shown kindness to our cubs. She has shared her warmth freely. Any who threaten her will answer to us. The silence shattered. Whispers erupted throughout the cafeteria. Species that had avoided for years were suddenly looking at her with new eyes. Ambassador pressed a hand to her chest, relief flooding her face. Sat down heavily in the nearest chair and started to laugh. Barely noticed any of it. She was too busy watching Ren open his silver eyes and look up at her with complete trust. Warm, the cub said. It was the first word she had ever heard a cub speak in standard. Yes, whispered back, I'm warm. Ren closed his eyes again and snuggled deeper into her palm. Around her the universe continued to spin. Species came and went. Diplomats made deals. Engineers fixed machines. Life on Harmony 7 moved forward as it always had. But something fundamental had changed. The human who ate alone was no longer alone. And she would never be again. 2 months had passed since the day the cubs climbed onto his table. In that time, everything had changed. It started small. The family began joining for every meal and sat across from her while Ren, Sola, and found their favorite spots on her lap, shoulders, and arms. The corner table that had once been a symbol of isolation became a gathering place. It became something new. Word spread quickly through Harmony 7. The story of the human and the cubs traveled from deck to deck, from species to species. Some told it as a warning. Look how strange humans are, even children cannot resist them. Others told it as a wonder, the warmest creature in the cold universe, giving freely what others could not find. But the cubs told it differently. To them it was simple. The human was kind. The human was warm. The human smiled, and it made everything better. Other species began to notice. They were the next to approach. They were small creatures, barely reaching knee, with smooth skin like geckos and large, curious eyes. A group of 3 juveniles came to her table one day, their parents watching nervously from a distance. "We heard you are warm," the bravest one said. Its translator made the words sound mechanical, but its eyes were full of hope. "Is it true?" Looked at the cubs, who were watching the newcomers with lazy interest. Ren made a sound that might have been welcome. "Would you like to find out?" asked. The juvenile reached out and touched her hand. Its eyes went wide. "Warm," it said, exactly as Ren had said that first day. "Very warm." Within a week had juveniles climbing up her arms and perching on her head during meals. Their parents were shocked at first. They were a careful species, slow to trust, but they could not argue with results. Their children stopped having nightmares. They ate better. They laughed more. The station's medical officer, a tall named doctor, came to study the effect. We're an ancient species. They're destroyed centuries ago. They had wandered the stars ever since, carrying their sadness with them like a weight. Doctor ran her instruments over and the cubs and the juveniles. She measured body temperatures and heart rates and brain activity. She wrote long reports filled with numbers and charts. But in the end, she put down her instruments and simply watched. "It is not the heat alone," she said finally. "Many species can generate heat. It is something else, something we do not have a word for." "What do you mean?" asked. Ren was asleep in her lap and 2 were braiding her hair with clumsy fingers. Doctor was quiet for a long moment. Her silver eyes seemed to look at something far away. "My species once knew creatures like you," she said softly. "Long ago, before our world burned, they were warm-blooded like humans. They gathered in groups. They cared for each other's young. They had a word for what they gave. We translated it as comfort, but that is not quite right." She reached out and touched his shoulder just briefly. Her hand was cold, as all hands were. "You give comfort," Doctor said. "Real comfort. The kind that cannot be created by machines or medicines. The kind that comes only from being near another living thing that cares whether you exist." Did not know what to say. She looked at the children around her, and now a few other species whose young had wandered over to investigate. They were all watching her, waiting, as if she had answers to questions they had not yet learned to ask. "I'm just sitting here," she said finally. "I'm not doing anything special." Laughed from across the table. He had grown fond of the human over the past weeks. "That is exactly what makes it special. You are not trying. You are simply being what you are. And what you are is something this station has needed for a very long time." As the weeks passed, the corner table grew more crowded. The station council had to bring in more chairs. Then they had to bring in more tables. Eventually, they simply redesigned the entire corner of the cafeteria to accommodate what everyone had started calling the warm zone. Species that had once avoided now sought her out. The elderly came to sit nearby, saying her presence reminded them of better times. The who still found her heat uncomfortable began sending their crystals to be warmed by her hands. Apparently it helped them grow stronger. Even the proper, dignified started joining the group, admitting quietly that perhaps human eating habits were not so terrible after all. Ambassador came to visit one evening. She stood at the edge of the warm zone, watching try to eat dinner while surrounded by cubs and juveniles and curious creatures of all kinds. "The council has a proposal for you," the ambassador said. Looked up, was hanging from her arm. 2 cubs were fighting over her lap. Something that looked like a small cloud was floating near her head, humming contentedly. "What kind of proposal?" "They want to offer you a position in the diplomatic corps," smiled. "Apparently, you have done more for human relations in 2 months than our entire department has done in 20 years. Laughed. It was still a strange feeling, laughing. She had almost forgotten what it felt like. "I'm not a diplomat," she said. "I'm just an engineer who happens to run a little warm." "You are more than that." Smile faded into something more serious. You showed the galaxy that humans are not just loud and strange and dangerous. You showed them that we can be kind, that we can be warm, that we can make even the coldest places feel like home. Ren stirred in his lap and looked up at her with sleepy silver eyes. Home, he repeated, trying out the word. Yes, said softly, stroking his fur. Home. She thought about her first days on Harmony 7. The isolation, the loneliness, the feeling of being an alien in a universe that did not want her. She had spent 2 years trying to prove that she was not a threat. 2 years hiding in corners and eating alone and wishing for something she could not name. She had found it now, not by hiding but by being exactly what she was. Human, warm, alive. Tell the council I will think about it, said to Ambassador. But for now, I think I am exactly where I need to be. The ambassador nodded and walked away. Around, the creatures of Harmony 7 continued to gather. Cubs purred. Juveniles chirped. Ancient beings sat in peaceful silence, remembering worlds that no longer existed. And in the center of it all, one small human sat at a table that was no longer lonely, giving warmth to a cold universe simply by being exactly who she was. Outside the viewport, stars burned in the endless dark. Ships came and went, carrying creatures to distant worlds. The galaxy spun on, vast and strange and full of beings who would never meet, never touch, never know each other existed. But here, in this corner of a metal station floating between stars, something beautiful had been built. Something warm. Something that felt, against all odds, like home. Smiled. And the universe, just for a moment, smiled back.